Brasil, Book 2, Life After Hell, Chapter 4, Starting Work, Psychological Terror in the Cells. End of February, I was informed that I was allowed to leave the Estágio 1 week before the regular end. Apparently, the police realized, by Claudia's commands, that it was becoming too dangerous to leave me there any longer. Immediately, I grabbed my stuff and could not wait to leave quickly enough this pigsty. But I had to wait until the afternoon, even had to go first to the school to listen for the second time to the talk of anonymous alcoholics, and then, with bag and baggage, I cleared into the yard. After everyone else was locked back in the Estágio, I was finally brought to the Pavilion 1. Fortunately, Claudia, Sandra, and many other foreigners were in this pavilion, but quickly enough came the disillusion when I found out that foreign women were not welcome here. The first cell I was assigned to, and where I already had dropped off my things and started washing my clothes, and I indeed had a lot of laundry. After 8 months I got the first time again my period. Was I politely but firmly informed that one of the cell residents had a heart problem and high blood pressure. With the 3 of us it would be complicated. Thus began a real odyssey, upstairs and downstairs. The occupants of the second cell did not want me neither. This was followed by discussions, arguments, and chaos, because no one knew where I should stay, but all searched a place for me. The guard lost her patience, and with their force I finally ended up in the first cell, if the 2 ladies liked it or not. But now it was me who no longer wanted to stay here. Who knew what would be ahead of me, and especially for how long? In a cell where I was not wanted? Claudia advised me to move in, and show them that the cell was not their property. Only under the condition that they continued to search for me a different cell, I moved back in again. And these 2 women also demanded that I would be moving out again until the following week, because they had wanted to reserve the 3rd place on the floor for a Brazilian from Estágio. Both women were non-smokers, so it bothered them as well that I smoked. Another problem. When the 2 complained to the guard, a young woman who was very much on the side of the foreigners, but wasn't working as guard for a very long time in the PFC, she really got angry and advised me to smoke whenever and how I wanted, and to ignore these 2 women. For the sake of peace, I climbed on an upturned bucket and smoked at the window, which was rather uncomfortable. In the evening the light was not turned on, because the 2 felt too hot. My newspapers were left untouched. Instead, I craned my head to watch TV at least a little, because the TV was on top of the cupboard. For both of them it was not a problem. They could easily watch from their beds. For me it was, because I was lying on the floor. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, I got the information that there was a place in another cell. First off, I checked whether they were smoking there. If the light stayed on at night, however, was soon convinced that it would go well here. With the 2 women, I moved with the permission of the guard. The 2 women of the cell I left took it absolutely not bad, even gifted me with t-shirts, shorts, a robe, a pillow and a blanket. What an exciting place. At the work distribution, I asked the agent to give me some appropriate job. I explained that I have absolutely no technical skills, since I worked my whole life with my brains. None of these jobs, like mounting and packing pieces in a medical device, was for me. If necessary, I would try it, but I would prefer to work in the administration. The lady promised to find a suitable activity for me. Then I signed up for all classes at the school: computer, Portuguese, Spanish, literature, etc. Strolled back to the pavilion afterwards, enjoying this bit of freedom after 8 months to be moving outside. The Saturday of my move was overshadowed by bad news. I received a letter from Michael. The letter was exactly like the first one. Neither was Michael responding to my questions, nor did he in any way comment what I wrote to him. He repeatedly mentioned how happy he was now, for my taste a little too often, that he had a girlfriend and was totally in love. With his sister everything was okay, but then he wrote that he was charged by the police, being 1 month only in Germany, for supposedly touching a girl immorally. And how could it be otherwise? Again he had trouble with his teacher. The confirmation for this I saw in the accompanying semi-annual assessment, which had been added by the foster mother in the SOS home more or less without comment. Michael disrupts the class, does no homework, and he won't reach the class goal of the 9th grade. It was once again a sleepless night for me. 1,000 thoughts went through my head. My worst fears had come true. Already he was harassed by the school administration as a sexual molester, threatening innocent girls. If he ever succeeded, he would leave school with 19, after finishing the 10th grade, if he repeated now. But it was absolutely obvious that he would leave school with 16, without qualifications, as soon as the compulsory education was over, because he already didn't have any motivation, maybe having in mind, Mom will sort it all out for me. And now, as he wrote, suddenly out of nowhere his biological father had turned up. Was he not deported to Ghana some years ago? I smoked one cigarette after another and became increasingly angry. Why are you not writing to Kathy? She's already very upset, Michael had been writing. Slowly but surely I doubted that he ever got my letters. But if this was the case, why he wasn't asking for any mail of me? He simply didn't read my letters. None of what I wrote he was interested in, or he did not want to understand how much he hurt me now. Totally in love and happy he was. Only I did not have the same right. I never had it. I had focused my entire life only on Michael. Since we lived in Spain, I never really thought about myself, and when I began to do so, it was too late. After a very long time, I was crying again. Here I could because I was undisturbed, but I wept not really about Michael, because it was long clear that I had lost him for good. No, I wept for my life that was wasted for nothing. What I had to expect from my own children, I was shown now in a cruel way, since I was arrested. In the morning I was the first to go and take a shower, then went to meet Claudia in the cafeteria to have coffee with her, where also the food was given out. She had total stress with her cellmates, everywhere the same thing. She looked at me wondering, my swollen eyes from crying, of course. It did not remain hidden, but she understood that the letter had stirred up a lot. More than ever stood my determination to stay in Brazil and never return to the past, to leave everything behind me. I let everyone know that I was looking for a man for marriage to stay in Brazil. What I did not tell anyone was my desire to marry for love. I still hoped for Jefferson and a letter of him, but any other man who proved that in spite of the prison to be good to me and cared a little, I would marry immediately and without hesitation. It was the first Sunday, and thus the first visiting day for me here in the PFC. Claudia asked me to come and do some groom shopping as the first visitors arrived. But what I saw was quite poor. However, too ugly, too old, and there wasn't much choice, because most people were celebrating Carnival or preferred to be on the beach instead of paying visits in prison. Until then, I still didn't get no newspaper personal ads in my hands. My time was running, since there was a new law out for reduction of the penalty, which everyone was happy about, except me, because this would mean deportation to Germany. I absolutely had to find someone to marry. Frustrated, I returned to my cell and wrote first thing an angry letter to the guardian of Michael, asking the men if anyone had been worrying about Michael's future when he was irresponsibly brought back to Germany. It was surely more than obvious that he was going down the drain, and my worst fears had already come true now, pointed out that I was hoping they would demand his father on subsequent strong support payments. I also wanted to know whether the letters were censored or if Michael did not even receive them. Maybe this man would respond. Afterwards, I wrote a reply letter to Michael, sad and angry at the same time. I let him know that under these circumstances, I refused to know about any German girlfriend of him, sending even regards to me. Michael could have imagined that. Bitterly, I wrote him that he had eventually destroyed thoroughly my dream and wish of a future Spanish daughter-in-law and Afro-Hispanic grandchildren. Also, I expressed how sorry I felt that he had run only after a month into problems with teachers and school headmasters. But I reminded him of the racism and discrimination in the German school system and made him aware that he should have known what he was getting into. From me, he could expect neither support nor sympathy. On the contrary, I refused to burden me with this problem once again. Also, I asked him to mention the name of his sister no longer in his letters. She did not exist for me anymore. I made it very clear that I would do everything to stay here and asked him what I should do in his opinion in Europe. I still loved him, despite everything. Always did and would always love him, but also I doubted whether we would ever see each other again. If he really loved me so much as he wrote in his letters, he could follow me at some point, but not without a solid education, I limited. Never again would I work my ass off for Michael, and certainly not for the other daughter I once brought to the world. Sinto muito saudades. Vai ficar sempre dentro do meu coração. I ended the letter, an explanation that I missed him very much, and he would remain forever in my heart. Should he go and look for someone to translate it if he was interested? No, I was not the same as I was when I left Spain to Brazil. In the evening, I went back down to the cafeteria, where, of course, Claudia already sat, and explained to me what shocky meant. If you look in the morning from the cell window directly into a gun barrel, and then be driven like cattle down the stairs by a bunch of heavily armed police in protective gear, to be sitting on your knees for hours with folded arms behind the head, then you know what is shocky. You have to undergo a body search. Don't look at the cops directly, and don't speak otherwise. It may happen that you get a blow with a rifle butt. Just do what the others do, she explained. Thinking about the steep stairs, I was nervous and hoped that this cop was passing me. Once I experienced something like it in Arusha. A force of armed police had invaded the hell, had completely destroyed or taken away everything. Even there we had to undergo a body search and sit a lengthy time on our knees. Claudia reported that shocky was expected each day, as the director was new, and with a change of the prison management, a shocky operation was normally due. If on one of the following days still remains quiet after 7 in the morning, and the cells are not opened, then you have to expect it. Monday morning I was up early as usual. Unusually long time it was quiet. My 2 cellmates woke also, switched on the TV to see what time it was, and it was already shortly before 8. We were all nervous, but nothing happened. The reason was simply and only Carnival. If Brazil is celebrating Carnival, life comes to a halt. No later than coffee time, all were relaxed again. It was the first weekend on March, and since 2 days I was working in one of the companies for hospital supplies. I had already learned some time ago that a word or promise of the guards or employment agents was worth nothing. I was assigned for the bagging of urine tubes, a very monotonous job. When I asked whether or not they had another more challenging work for me, I got from the boss the answer that I now had a job, wouldn't get another one. Besides, administrative jobs would not be awarded to prisoners. Well, she forgot to mention they would not be awarded to foreign prisoners. My spirits were sinking. Personal ads, so far, I couldn't manage to get hold of yet. In the library were magazines also, but only those not related to dating. The visitors on Sundays were not permitted to bring magazines. Since I heard nothing of Mr. Waldman, I still did not know if we had already been talking to Jeff. I felt terribly lonely. Claudia was pretty useless for me. She was very irritated. She had moved out of her cell due to the problems with her roommates, and now she was even worse off. I got the impression that Claudia forgot we were only foreigners, without rights. Something I had learned in a short time she had not yet grasped by 2.5 years. In vain she strove for equal rights. This would never function, and I tried to make this clear to her, that she stood so alone because there was not even cohesion among the foreign women. Many were just scared, and that was not unfounded. Every Friday a meeting of the foreign women was organized by an association called ITTC. This association consisted of church members, lawyers, and social workers. Those people tried to help by sending and receiving emails for the prisoners, often the only way to keep in contact with the families. Since I saw no other way, I asked one of these employees for help, described him my problem, explained that I had nobody and nothing to go back to, that no home existed for me anymore, and therefore I wanted to stay in Brazil. Explained that the only possibility to stay in Brazil was marriage, but a fake marriage could be considered for me only as a last measure. I wanted an honest marriage. It cost me quite a bit of persuasion of the man who agreed to help me, as he would provide me with contacts from the internet or newspapers. He also was willing to put my profile on the internet. Again, there was a little hope for me. Claudia knew about a Swiss lady who helped foreign prisoners in Brazil. She gave me the address. I wrote to this woman and also told her my problem. With a prepaid envelope, I sent a letter with some people of the various churches that filled the pavilion on Saturdays also. Sunday I wrote another letter to Mr. Waldman, asking him again for a jumbo. In the cell was nothing anymore, everything used up. No more juice, the cigarettes came to an end, no milk, nothing. It seemed as it would probably take some weeks yet until the next purchase, for a regularity of 4 weeks didn't exist in this place. Sometimes it worked and we could do our purchasing every 4 weeks. Another time the people were waiting 5 or 6 weeks. Our shopping was cancelled completely, and we waited 8 weeks for another one. It was frustrating if you had nobody who cared outside. The Brazilian women, supported by their families here, weren't too bad off. Each week a jumbo, SEDEX, and the Sundays visitors came with homemade food, pizza, cake, and lots of other things. I tried to cope as best as I could. But Claudia, with her moods, was becoming more and more unbearable, so I resolved to go on a little distance. The first few weeks of work I had by now behind me, and was becoming just as frustrated as Claudia. Actually, I could now understand her. Nothing worked out well. Nothing functioned. Mr. Waldman simply didn't respond. The ITTC people hadn't come again yet. Martha, the Swiss lady, didn't write back. Actually, I didn't receive any more mail at all, and asked myself what was happening. Had I been finally forgotten about completely by everyone? Or could it be that I didn't receive nothing because they couldn't read and censor it? In any case, I felt terrible. The food was so bad that it made me feel like puking, so I returned to work after lunch break with an empty stomach. Since there was no more juice, it was even worse for me, because I drank no water for nothing in the world, and certainly not here. I didn't fancy much to be getting a lead poisoning. On Wednesday, Mr. Sturm had me and Claudia called out from work. As always, he only brought bad news again. A letter from Michael, and of this shit Guardian describing in detail how father and son were becoming closer again at their first meetings in nice cafes. How insensitive was this person. And when Mr. Sturm told me that I could not even prevent a deportation by marrying, and that he didn't bring no newspapers or magazines with personal ads, I completely lost my composure. Claudia tried to calm me when I yelled at this ignorant deaf stallion. Only with great difficulty I could restrain my tears. This big shit should not see me cry. With pleasure he still informed us that Mr. Waldman had a major health problem and may not carry on with his volunteer job. This Mr. Sturm seemed to have fun to see people suffer. Again I screamed at him that I need urgent help from outside, but without his help I wasn't able to make any contact. It left him completely cold. Now Claudia interfered in the conversation. Mr. Sturm, Rita eats here almost nothing, but got only the stupid and mocking response, "She better be getting used to rice and beans." I could hardly endure it when he described how much he was worn out by his work, this sun-tanned smoothie who was every other month in the hospital for a cure or for pleasure vacation. I wished to tell him he no longer even needed to come and see us, but unfortunately we depended on this man to pay money on our accounts, which he managed for us as if dealing with minor children. The rest of the day I felt very bad. I could hardly endure this arrogant person any more. During the evening I pondered how I could make it here without the help and contact, and how it should proceed at all. In any case, this visit made it that Claudia and I were sticking together again a little more. But therefore I had pure stress in my cell by the end of the week. Georgina was told that she would go to semi-aberto, semi-open prison, which meant, theoretically, as I learned later, work outside and come back to jail just for sleeping. However, this was absolutely not what she wanted, because she had hoped to be released, according to the new law, after a third of her sentence. She had desperately wished to go home to her 4 children, who needed to be looked after. I understood her disappointment, and would have loved to swap with her, just by the idea of working outside and eating outside, not to mention the possibility of finding a man to marry. I didn't want to give up my hopes, especially as Claudia introduced me to a South African woman who had the same intentions as I, and already waited for her documents to get married. Meanwhile, Georgina fell more and more into depression. Ed Vanier and I suffered a lot under her unpredictable bad temper. As much as I liked Georgina, so much I wished these days that she would be transferred as soon as possible. I had no more strength to help others and to support them. This was now for me the pure struggle for survival. On Friday we were finally able to fill out our shopping list, which meant it could still take about 2 weeks until we would receive our purchases. After calculating the total amount, I was totally sure that I would have to give up smoking. My money was not enough to buy every month at least 3 cartons of cigarettes. Since money was forbidden, cigarettes were regarded here as a currency. Everything was paid with cigarettes or replaced. Some hoarded cigarettes, which they did business in their cells with, but no one wanted to borrow. That meant another 2 weeks without food or cigarettes for me. On the 1st of April 2006, changed a lot, including in the cell. Since I was tired of constantly looking for my few pieces of laundry or my things at all, I made it my habit to stuff most necessary things in a plastic bag to take them with me to work, just to find them again whenever needed. Everyone laughed at me already, and even the guards made their jokes, but Georgina did not laugh, because it gave the impression as if the others in my cell were stealing. Finally, we had a clarifying debate. I explained to her that I would not touch her stuff, nor of the others, without being asked, and the same I expected of her. I didn't want to look constantly for all my things every day, because she removed them elsewhere. She seemed to understand, and the situation eased. Unfortunately, only for a few days. In the meantime, Mrs. Bischoff came to see me. There was nothing new to report. No prospect of a speedy trial or a verdict was not yet available. There hadn't even been a request as yet for the defense. I requested an explanation, specifically of the meaning by the oft-cited minimum sentence, on which she said that I'd have to expect a sentence of about 2 years and 8 months, if I was lucky. But in the end, what a difference would it make? 2 years or 4 years? I didn't know where I was going afterwards anyway. I asked her for advice to stay in Brazil. Marriage, she advised me, didn't get me anywhere. But she planned to suspend the deportation officially in court and apply for a right to stay, so she said. I was a little reassured now, even if it was only a small chance. Finally, I asked her once again to call Luciano and ask him to keep my remaining belongings in Spain. Mrs. Bischoff had not told me everything from the first phone conversation with Luciano. As I was sure for now, she interjected that Luciano would probably reject. Nevertheless, I asked her to explain to him that he was the only reason for me to return to Spain. Suddenly, I was fighting back the tears. The memory still gave me much pain. If he wanted to forget me, then he should at least give Mrs. Bischoff some contacts in Argentina, in the event that I would actually be expelled from Brazil, with a promise to return in the next or the following week, which turned out to be once again an empty promise. She said goodbye. In regard of Luciano, I had not much hope, because he had not yet written a single time. One thing was certain, though. Through Jeff, I had learned to love again, after many years, and with Luciano I lived it with passion. Therefore, I would seek my fortune here or in Argentina. Mail I no longer received, and this had been for weeks now. I was seriously worried what was going on with Rosie. Even from Andrea in Aruja, I didn't receive a letter. I wrote, but no one responded to my letters, not even Mr. Waldman. Claudia suggested I should write all again and put her name as the sender, because she was already sentenced. As she told me, her letters would no longer be controlled and would all reach her. So I wrote again to Luciano, Rosie, Andrea, Yasmin, and all others, explaining the situation. Finally, I actually got a letter from Mr. Waldman, in which he explained how bad he was, and the attached letter from my mother he could not drop off personally. Not a word he lost about Jefferson, and whether he had spoken with him or not. Not a word about a new jumbo. The letter of my mother made everything even harder for me again. She had attached a photo of herself and my father, taken a day before his death, and a photo of his coffin set up in the church. Even of Michael she had added a photo, taken at his sister's house at Christmas. Really grown up he appeared on the picture. Again I was very sad, and also angry. Why my mother sent me this photo, which she had received herself, and why not Michael himself, this or other photos? The fact that his sister would not send me a photo of Michael was perfectly clear. I was angrier about the stupid things they tried to convince my mother of, now like an accommodation in a Spanish home had become too expensive. Who on earth had told her this crap story? In an 8-page letter I explained my mother once more in detail about it, that Michael's scheming sister, daughter, I would never call her again, was responsible for everything, and after all, for the death of my father and for Michael's failure in Germany. Meanwhile, I was pretty much on withdrawal concerning cigarettes. Claudia helped me as far as possible, but also her cigarettes came to finish. I didn't make a coffee break anymore, worked through only in order not to be tempted to borrow cigarettes of others. But this work caused that I was getting more and more depressed. I had just too much opportunity to be thinking all day. This repetitive activity to pack these latex enemas in plastic bags required no concentration. At least once a day I fought back tears as my mind wandered on again and again to Michael and what he did to me. But then I started again to escape into my dream world in Fortaleza, along with Jefferson. I knew I had to forget him, but my desire to have someone who loved me, who was ready to begin a new life with me, was overwhelming. After work, however, there was no opportunity to be thinking. Georgina was always sad and cried often. I cared for her and comforted her. When we were finally able to pick up our purchases, 2 bags of milk burst open. Because the big bags were so heavy, I had to drag them behind me. It was very annoying for me and a great loss. This was the general payday for everyone. But Georgina was not able to collect all the debts others had with her, and therefore couldn't pay her own drug debts. I slowly realized what really was going on. Her despair and fear were well-founded. Drug charges were controlled and debts punished severely by the PCC, Primero Comando de Capital, up to execution, which was in prison, however, generally presented that it looked like suicide. Now happened that Claudia had warned me of some time ago. Georgina wanted to sell her bed, which I would normally have inherited after her leaving. And not just the bed, she planned to sell the entire cell, and began to consider which cell she could send me to, since I could not very well go to the guards to tell them that I was chucked out from that cell. Logically, it was officially prohibited to sell beds or entire cells, but the Brazilians did so anyway, with the consent of the PCC. Only much later did I realize that this prison and the PE next door was only ruled by the PCC and not by the state. Rules PCC disagreed on simply didn't happen. Guards and police were subordinating to these gangsters and terrorist organizations. I was pretty down. In the second floor, there was absolutely no one with whom I could imagine to share a cell with. I liked the downstairs people better, but everything was crowded. The hope that the ITTC helped me, I borrowed in such days as well. When Sebastian, to whom I had described my problem, did not come back anymore. His replacement listened to all my problems all over again and wanted to go on with it. He didn't know anything about the emails I had given Sebastian for Silica and Cesar in Chile, but promised to find out about this. In the cell, we now had no TV anymore, because Georgina had only rented one, which was also forbidden by punishment, and now couldn't pay the rent anymore. Although I offered to take over the rent, she had returned the TV to the owner. Since I didn't know whether a TV would be in the cell I would probably be moving to, I saw myself already missing out the World Cup that was taking place in this year. Once again I wrote to Mr. Waldman. Nothing seemed to work at the moment. Frustrated, I said to Claudia, everything would be much easier if there was out there someone who could help with such things. The following Friday I went back to the ITTC meeting. The young man was back, but referred me to a pastor who could do that with the ads. Emails would be sent only to families, not to friends. And what if one has no family? When I asked whether ITTC could at least help in obtaining a television, I got the answer, no, that's impossible, because of administration and so. Disappointed, I got up and left the somewhat bewildered-looking young man sitting without a word. That was the last time. ITTC for me is a waste of time, I commented later towards Claudia. I listened around myself in the pavilion to see if someone sold his TV. I was warned that this was forbidden, and I could be punished with castigo, solitary confinement, in isolation cells, where neither light nor water works. But why should I be punished? Should anyone have an offer for me to buy, I would march to the director, of course, and ask why this should be banned. I wanted to make it official and not in secret. The problem, however, solved itself a few days later, when I was called to the entrance where Mr. Waldman had left a TV for me, a brand new one. This I didn't understand at all. He was too sick to visit me, but he could drop off a TV. I accepted the TV and dragged it towards the pavilion, where Georgina was approaching me, grabbed the TV and swung it easily over her shoulders to carry it up to the second floor. I don't even know what you're happy about. I'm moving out. Forgot it? I teased. You do indeed, Georgina teased back. Nevertheless, the three of us spent a rather relaxing television evening. But later I heard Georgina crying again, wondering how I could help her. I liked Georgina and her children very much. They were very beautiful and sweet children. So I did something that really and completely went against the grain. I wrote a letter to my mother and asked for a transfer of €150. This amount was worth far more than this cell, and I wasn't too keen on buying a prison cell. I just wanted to help so Georgina would not drop back into crime out of despair and lack of money. When I explained what I was doing, Georgina refused. She didn't accept money from me, but I wanted her to have the money after her release for the children. Somehow, I developed motherly feelings for Georgina. This was probably what I was looking for, substitute children. All the more disappointing were the following days for me. First, I found it a bit odd that Paula, a friend of Georgina I didn't really like, and we normally didn't even greet each other, stayed in our cell one night and was suddenly extremely friendly towards me. On the second, she moved in completely with bag and baggage. Hostile, I asked her if she was now staying here. No, I will move to another pavilion, but that is only possible tomorrow. Georgina confirmed the same story, but I didn't believe a word of that story, and I was right. She stayed in our cell, made plenty of noise together with Georgina, and I just felt disappointed, personally, by Georgina. I now looked for a new cell for myself, although Claudia strongly discouraged me to do so. I didn't listen to her. Why would Georgina reject my offer for help? At this time, I didn't understand that she needed the money immediately, and not for her children, to pay her debts. And obviously, Paula had paid at least for the bed. It was hardly possible for me to stay with 4 in a cell because of my claustrophobia. The cells were too small, and it was not clear yet when Georgina would be leaving. Therefore, I asked the guard for help in the search for a new cell. The guard, however, refused, since it was already late, and now a move would not be happening anymore. In Claudia's cell, I had to listen of Neiji, her roommate, something like a reproach, that Georgina would like me very much, and I ought to stay there. A lot of women would come down from the Stasio, and more cells would be occupied by 4 women yet. Claudia also tried to convince me to stay in Georgina's cell. Nobody here knew my big-headed attitude, though. Before I took a shower, I told Georgina that I was looking for another cell and would be moving out as soon as possible. Please, if you want to go, go, came almost defiant from her. Claudia almost dragged me out of the shower and made me follow her downstairs, where actually was a place for me in a cell with only 2 women, Rosangela, a heavily built black Brazilian, and Denise, a white, very quiet but nice colleague of mine. Rosa, another Brazilian from the first floor, interfered in the issue and made clear to those 2 that the German gringa probably was still better than one of the South Africans. Since I was by now already known and respected, they preferred to take me in than any of the others, because the 2 knew they would not be staying alone. Thus we quickly agreed, and I could move the next day. The only problem in the cell was that they already had a television, and per cell was, obviously, only one allowed. Rosangela said we would solve this problem. Georgina was apparently questioned by the others about my relocation and hissed at me how I'd get to carry problems between us outside of the cell. Excuse me, if I'm forced to move because I cannot stay with 4 people due to my claustrophobia, I surely have to ask others for help in the search for a cell. I justified myself. You could have the bed up, but you didn't want it. She held against me. It's not about any bed. I give a damn if I sleep in bed or on the floor. But didn't get any further because she didn't want to hear nothing anymore. Refused any further discussion. The evening was chaotic. Edvania and Georgina threw my food from the cupboard, mixed the wet and dry clothes, and I rummaged around in the pile to find back my clothes and other things. Secretly, I was very glad for not having sent the letter to my mother yet. Paula suddenly began to cry hysterically. I tried to sleep, which of course was not possible again because Paula and Georgina caused too much noise, and additionally Edvania was feeling sick. Almost without having any sleep, I stood up early and waited for the cells to be opened. I immediately asked if I could move out. Luckily enough, it was one of the guards that liked me and let me move. Merely explained that I still needed to fill out the application of movement later on. Within half an hour I had finished everything, though Georgina angrily slammed the cell door shut from the inside, and I had to call the guard again to open once more. Denise helped me with the organization of my stuff, even though it was still early and I disturbed her sleep with my moving. She made extra rooms so that my things were separate from those of the other 2, which showed me that they respected a little privacy here. The time was very scarce. I had to have a shower yet and didn't want to be late for work and lose my chance for the kit. Monthly addition to the wage for constant attendance and punctuality in the form of hygienic products, toilet paper, chocolate, candy, milk powder, cookies, etc. Rosangela had taken a TV already in another cell, so that problem was solved also. I was sure to have taken the correct decision. Rosangela, Denise and I were getting on well together. Rosangela worked 7 days a week in the kitchen, and I was with Denise alone in the cell until late in the evening. It was quiet and relaxing, with no stress. In the morning I saved myself the queue for a shower because I left the cell with the kitchen stuff, since for them the cells were opened earlier than for the others. So I was showered and ready for the day early and was able to take my coffee in a relaxing manner before going to work. Even the stress of getting coffee I had passed, since Rosangela reserved coffee for us. But here also the first impression was a huge mistake, and I should soon learn that I was once again from bad to worse. Easter Sunday, 2006. The saddest Easter of my life. The word celebration wasn't correct anyway. I had been pretty much down again for some time. The cause was another letter from Michael, which gave me seriously the idea to break off contact entirely. It was simply no good for me, not the way it was. Again he wrote how great everything was, how much he loved Norderstedt, and that he had now regular contact with his father. My reply letter was accordingly cynical. I knew that he needed me no more. But had I done everything wrong? I just wanted a better future for my son. The permanent negative reports of the Berlin Taz I still received of Claudia steered me also. Discussions about the abolition of the secondary school, middle school, school for the dregs of society, violence in secondary schools, secondary school students in Hamburg stabbed at bus stop, and so on. Frightened and angry, I wrote again to the guardian of Michael that it was irresponsible to be bringing my son to Germany. This time I received an immediate response with the next visit of Mr. Sturm. The fact that you were arrested in Brazil. It is neither the fault of your son, not ours. In which direction the academic progress of your son is going. This guardian wrote, so I had been already stamped as a criminal and made responsible for everything. Whatever would happen to Michael, it would be my fault. As simple as that. In addition to this letter, I also got one from the German consulate in Spain, in which they wrote to me they were able to contact Luciano. He was asked to take care of my things. His answer was he did not want any problems. How much pain can a person endure? How much disappointment? With this, Luciano had slammed shut the last door into Spain for me. Claudia, who until then lived in the cell next door, had now the same problems as me before. They took a fourth into the cell. Again, it was about some drug debt that had to be paid off by selling a bed. Now, Claudia moved again to another cell. Marlene, a Colombian Swiss woman, and next to Claudia and me, the only German-speaking, offered a place in her cell. 1 week everything went well. Then heated debates started for some primitive reasons, like the television program. Almost everywhere the same problems. Until 10:30 in the evening, Monday to Saturday, some stupid novellas. Those with a little more in their brains had to keep themselves occupied, otherwise, in order not to go gaga all over. Up to then, I was fairly tolerant, read, studied, and wrote letters during this time. Only the news were interesting me, and on Saturdays, Sabadato, the music show I loved since Arusha, because it offered a lot of music in addition to entertainment and information. This show just spread a lot of good humor, and for a short time I forgot my depression. In the evenings I was so tired then that I didn't even watch the movie, which usually followed the novellas, but was already asleep. Sleep was for me the only way to escape that overwhelming desire for someone who loved me, who waited for me outside, and helped me survive this terrible time, which was so painful and unbearable. It hurt so much to see that the Brazilians received letters of their husbands, friends, and families. The foreigners also received a lot of mail. If not of their families, they all had pretty fast pen pals from other prisons. What were in comparison those 3 letters of Michael, in which he wrote me only how great everything was? Or the sporadic letters from my mother, she only wrote when she had nothing else to do. Even from Arusha, I hadn't received no mail for a long time, and of Rosie, certainly much longer. This gave me an additional headache. I still didn't know if she was sick, if my letters had reached her, or Michael's sister had intrigued again. Wouldn't have surprised me. But I wanted to know what happened to my book. Since Mr. Waldman had sent my book with his son to Germany and to Rosie, I had heard nothing more of her. Meanwhile, my language courses had started. I was glad to have 3 times a week instruction after work. The Portuguese course started at first somewhat chaotic, without any planning and structure. The Spanish course upset me emotionally, as all the memories were revived. The assistant to the Spanish teacher came from Barcelona. She liked me very much and brought me Spanish newspapers and magazines. The teacher who came from Argentina was teaching us the Argentine vocabulary, which are deviating from the Castellano. This also almost broke my heart, because I saw and heard Luciano actually before me, talking to me. My only hope remaining for me was to find someone who loved me and made me go on for something worth it. I had buried the hope for Jeff by now. Mr. Waldman had never contacted him. I barely ate, had absolutely no appetite. I didn't like the food anyway, and when the crisis started in the cell, once again for stupid reasons, somehow it was always the same. I withdrew myself from everyone, didn't talk as good as with anyone anymore. Instead, worked at first like possessed on my studies, and then involved myself with a large novel of Zimmer, which I found in the library. I didn't want to study anymore. After the last visiting day, it began to be uncomfortable in the cell. Denise was in a bad mood, even though her family had visited her. What was I supposed to say? The next day I asked her to turn the light on before she left the school. I couldn't reach the light bulb, neither could I perform any acrobatic act to try at all. She refused, telling me I should wait until she returned from school. The idea of sitting around idly 2 hours, looking at those stupid novellas on the TV, really made me panic. However, I tried to stay calm and asked her again. Denise was just being stubborn and answered with the words, "Let Rosangela do that." Impossible. Rosangela was not larger than me, but 3 times as big. How should she climb the half wall or the upper half on the bed? I let Denise go and then called Deborah, cell, for help. She, however, hesitated because she probably knew those two better than me. She wanted no trouble. I assured her that I would take the responsibility and she wouldn't have any trouble. Well, Rosangela actually stood in the door as Deborah was just about to turn on the light and asked in a booming voice what was going on here and what Deborah was doing on Denise's bed. I explained the situation, to which Rosangela warned, "Don't get caught by Denise letting someone on her bed." She didn't say any more at this moment. But when Denise returned from school, Rosangela made no mention of who switched on the light, but folded Denise together for this. "If Rita needs the light on and asks you to do it, you will turn on the light. Is that clear?" Amen. I did not expect this, but of course the case wouldn't stay without a response, because from now on the fan in our cell was turned on, no matter if it was hot or cold weather. It was running continuously. My eyes caught an infection due to this. Even back in Spain I could never stand this wind of fans. But I said nothing, didn't want any more problems. On TV I followed with interest every opportunity to watch, which was not often. Informative reports about Brazil. I became increasingly aware how dangerous it could be for me to move alone here in this country. But was I really concerned about danger? I shared my thoughts with Claudia, and we philosophized about the profane things one had to think of for the release. Toothbrush, toothpaste, toilet paper, cream, some clothes to change, not too much of everything, since I planned to travel with bag and backpack through the country. Claudia suggested that I should think in time for a sleeping bag, and asked me almost the same time if I had no fear in this vast country. This I had asked myself. Well, what did I have to lose, except my life? And if it shouldn't be that I found someone who loved me, alone my life was worth nothing anyway. This, however, I kept to myself. I still harbored the hope to place some personal ads myself and to meet someone this way. I had already designed a text and sent it to the church newspaper, lying around here always, and had asked Mr. Sturm to pass this text to a daily newspaper. In the school, where I also met women of the other pavilions, which was possible only during working time and school. Otherwise, we were kept strictly separated to other pavilions. I met a woman from Fortaleza. She suggested not to go to Fortaleza because there was only work during the 3-month season of holidays. Otherwise, it was quite dead. The same problem like at Spain's coast. This puzzled me, but I didn't know yet, anyway, if I was allowed to remain in this country. And if I should find a nice man in Sao Paulo, why not just stay here? Here, indeed, the chances of work were better anyway. If they wouldn't let me stay, I would simply be going in the opposite direction, to Paraguay or Argentina. Many if and buts, additionally to the inner conflict and the stress with the others in the cell. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. After my TV had crashed from the bed on the concrete floor, shortly after I moved in by Denise's scatterbrained behavior during our cleaning of the cell, but it still functioned. Contrary to my expectations, I rather moved it now myself back and forth. Denise took this very personally and was mortally offended. In fact, she was always moody, and I never knew what was wrong with her. In a moment she called me her friend. I had no friend here, for my part. And the next she turned her radio so loud the times when I wanted to follow the news that I didn't understand a word. I was so pissed off I would have loved to have a single cell. However, this was a dream. There was a little joy for me when Claudia brought me 2 letters that arrived with her, as she predicted, uncensored. Because she was already sentenced, no one was interested. One of Yasmin, the other one of Andrea, so they had not forgotten. Both gave the same reason why they didn't write for a long time. In Arusha had happened another blitz. The police had found in Chits 4 a hole dug in the wall which was planned to be used for some to escape. The police responded really angry and raged accordingly. Mattresses, televisions, plates, spoons, cups, toilet paper, writing paper and pens, everything, absolutely everything, ended up in the garbage. Since I once experienced the blitz, not as extreme, because otherwise my book would not have ended up in Germany, I knew that the girls were suffering there. Until the second visit of her mother, Andrea had no writing materials, not to mention a mattress for sleeping. Yasmin and all the others were just as bad off. I could not find the right words in my reply letters to express how sorry I felt for them. I was afraid, too, because this was expected in this place any day now, blitz or shocky. Then one evening the talk was, tomorrow is the day. The whole night I couldn't sleep, but it was proved once again as false alarm. Shocky had been turned away by the director. Currently, however, broke out constantly new riots in other prisons, which were just as bad, if not worse, than the police action. The situation was very critical and tense, and the telephone lines between the PCC women and the big bosses were running hot. For me, this was an additional mental stress. Of the many other foreigners, I heard that they had extreme problems with the Brazilians. Again and again, it started with simple things, and then escalated. With Claudia, it happened again, and once again she was told to look for another cell. On Easter Saturday, things were getting too far for me as well, when Denise refused changing the program, so I could watch Sabadazo like every Saturday. I reproached her that she was playing around, changing the programs however she wanted for 6 days a week, so it should surely be possible that I, at least on Saturday, could watch what I wanted, and insisted that she change the program immediately. Reluctantly, she handed me the remote control with a pointed remark. Yes, you made it clear already that it is your TV. Once again, offended, she left the cell. My goodness, what a kindergarten was this year. In this cell, I could forget about the Soccer World Cup, the only reason I wanted a television. Together with Claudia, I sent a letter to the director, in which we asked for a cell just for us in another pavilion. By God, we had tried, but these women could not communicate with each other, let alone as foreigners. Frustration and bad temper was omitted to the third one in the cell, and this especially if the third person was a gringo. If there was no reason to fight, then they would be looking until one was found, and due to lack of education, it wasn't possible to clear the air by talking about it. We foreigners were the ones suffering by the situation, and rights we had none. Somehow it was repugnant to me, but still it seemed to me the best solution to be with Claudia on the long term. However, I set my conditions. No phone in the cell, was punished with castigo even if one didn't own it. It was simply bad luck when it was found in the cell. No drugs. Claudia smoked Maconia. And that stuff could drop one into shit as well. No debt. That meant trouble with PCC. And the World Cup. Also, Claudia hated football. She gave me her word, and so it was sealed. Since every cell change was taken very personally, I already had discovered for myself, Georgina didn't speak a word with me. We did everything under the cloak of secrecy, to avoid further trouble. Until we hoped to move, we pledged ourselves, eyes shut and through with it. For Maundy Thursday, we had a day off, but our shopping, once again, was not coming before Easter. Almost no one had any more cigarettes, another long and cruel weekend without reasonable food and without cigarettes. Claudia managed it again to organize cigarettes from somewhere. My pride forbade me to ask someone other than Claudia for cigarettes. Saturday, however, Claudia had none anymore. Now Denise enjoyed the full of her superiority and offered me generously of her own, whatever I accepted them. Rosangela was something different. Still, the cigarettes lying around here you can take. You don't have to ask or wait until I offer you. That evening I wrote a letter to Michael, asking him urgently at least to help me save my things from Chris. Therefore, he should communicate with Cande, the mother of his former best friend Miguel, in Spain, or at least send me her full address. Maybe I could even still save anything. To the letter I added a newspaper article about the 0 opportunities for secondary school pupils in Germany, and asked him to comment how he imagined his future. Wrote very clearly that I was tired of whitewashing of facts. Once again I was very heavy-hearted, but I wanted clarity. This letter I sent Mr. Sturm with a request that it be forwarded, as I once more had no stamps. I also reminded him on the occasion of my personal ads